I'll never forget that night. A June evening, bright with party lights, the sound of glasses clinking, the smell of BBQ drifting through the air, and the laughter that I thought was joy. It was Father's Day, the party I threw to celebrate life, to thank the people who'd stood by me for 30 years building my company. I never imagined that night would also be the day I'd lose the son I had loved the most. When the bottle of Napa Cabernet shattered against my forehead, the red wine mixed with the blood dripping onto the lawn. I didn't hear anything, just the beat of my own heart. And then, in the moment when everyone expected me to explode with fury, I just smiled. That smile wasn't from a crazy man, but from a man who had just understood the truth he'd been denying for far too long. My name is Samuel Monroe. I'm 61 years old, and I own a major construction firm in Denver. My whole life, I believed that hard work, honor, and family were three things that couldn't be bought. I have two kids, Claire, a neurosurgeon, my pride, and Danny, the son I once thought would follow in my footsteps, but who ended up becoming my worst nightmare. The party was at The Pines, our estate, the place where my wife Mary and I planted every single rosebush with our own hands when we were young. 50 guests, colleagues, old friends, all raising their glasses to toast the lucky father with two successful kids. I was smiling, but deep down, I was uneasy that Danny still hadn't shown up. He had promised me he'd come early, but for months his promises hadn't been worth anything. At 9:30, the electric gate buzzed open with a sound that felt like an omen. Danny staggered in, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from booze. Behind him was Brooke, his wife, a woman with a cold beauty, like a sharpened steel blade. "Dad, we need to talk, right now," Danny yelled, making the music stop cold. I tried to stay calm. "Today is Father's Day, son. Can we talk later, okay?" "No, I need $400,000, this week, or I'm finished." The entire yard went silent. My old friends looked at each other, not knowing whether to get up or pretend they couldn't hear. I moved toward him, ready to pull him aside, but he grabbed a bottle of Cabernet from the table and smashed it over my head. Glass embedded in my skin, the wine stained my white shirt. I staggered and heard his voice, loaded with hate. "You should just rot already, old man. Always wanting to keep everything for yourself." Brooke said nothing. She just stood behind him, a faint smile on her face, like someone enjoying a well-planned scene. I wiped the blood with my hand. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled. "Thanks, Danny. This gift is exactly what I needed." He froze. Everyone froze. Nobody knew that bloody smile was the start of a war that I had been preparing for a long, long time. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments below. As everyone stood there stunned, I stood up, took a napkin from the table, and wiped the blood. I spoke with a calm that surprised even me. "It's nothing, just an accident. Please enjoy the party." Carol Dunham, my lifelong business partner, ran to steady me, and Dr. Miller urged me to go inside to clean the wound, but I just raised my hand, signaling it wasn't necessary. The cut on my forehead didn't hurt as much as the gash in my soul. Ever since my wife passed, I had put up with all of Danny's flaws. His drinking, his debts, his clumsy lies, because I always believed that the love between a father and son was strong enough to heal anything. I was wrong. Danny was still standing there, eyes bloodshot, breathing hard. When people moved toward me, he backed away and said in a harsh voice, "Don't play the victim, Dad. You spent your whole life controlling me, forcing me to live the way you wanted. Did you ever think about what I needed?" A murmur rippled through the table. I heard someone let out a sigh. I looked at him, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "Danny, it's Father's Day. You're drunk. Go sleep it off." "Drunk? No, Dad, I'm perfectly clear. I need $400,000 to pay a debt that, in part, you helped create. If you don't give it to me, they'll come for this whole family." Brooke, at his side, put her hand on her husband's shoulder and spoke softly, but just loud enough for me to hear. "Sam, maybe you should help him. What kind of father lets his son get into trouble?" Her voice was smooth as velvet, but it hid an icy dagger. I looked at Brooke. I didn't see concern for her husband. I saw a glint in her eyes every time money was mentioned. In that instant, I understood this wasn't just a simple family conflict. There was something deeper, Something dirty hidden under the guise of concern for the future, I replied in a low voice. If you really need my help, come to my office tomorrow morning, sober. We'll talk like men. For now, you both need to leave. Danny let out a dry, mocking laugh. Like 2 men? Who do you think you are? A shaky old man hoarding money in his safe, thinking he's smarter than everyone. And then, pointing at me in the dead silence that covered the yard, he added, It's pathetic. You spent your life building a castle of bricks, but you couldn't keep a family together. Those words were a knife straight to the heart. All eyes turned to me, some sympathetic, others looking away. Brooke pulled on her husband's arm. She murmured, Let's go, honey. But in her gaze, I saw something strange. The joy of someone who had just planted a poisonous seed. They left, leaving me under the party lights that were starting to dim. Carol took my trembling hand and asked, Sam, how can you still be smiling? I answered quietly, without looking at anyone. Because I just found out who my son really is, and who he isn't. That night, after everyone had gone, I went out to the yard alone and looked at the drops of red wine still staining the grass. They looked like blood, but they gave off a sweet, sour smell. I said to myself, From now on, this blood won't be spilled for nothing. I didn't know then that the first crack had opened, and that through it, the whole castle of trust would start to crumble. That night, when the last car pulled through the gate, the garden at the Pines fell into absolute silence. The lights that once shone festively now reflected off the ground, covered in glass shards, dark with wine and blood. I stood there, alone, among the wreckage of the party. The smell of BBQ mixed with the iron of the spill, and my stomach tightened. But strangely, I didn't feel anger. I just felt cold, a sharp cold that ran from the back of my neck down to my heart, as if my body had just buried a part of itself. Claire showed up when it was all over. She ran to me, her eyes wide, horrified to see me. My God, Dad, who did this to you? I didn't answer right away. I took a towel, pressed it to my forehead, and looked at her. In my head, a single question echoed. How did her brother turn into this? Claire was still trembling. Her surgeon's hands gently touched the wound. You need stitches, Dad. It's deep. I shook my head gently. It's fine, honey. A little blood won't take me down. There are things that hurt more, and no one sees them. She took my hand tenderly, with that sad, calm look that seemed like a reflection on water. She didn't insist. She just said, If your son forgets who he is, at least you still have your daughter. I smiled, but I was empty inside. When Claire went to bed, I was alone again. The night wind blew through the rose bushes. I sat on the old wooden bench, the same one where I used to play chess with Danny when he was a kind little boy. I closed my eyes, and the images returned clearly. Him running through the yard with a small hammer in his hand, yelling that he wanted to help me fix the fence. I had told him, Someday you'll build the houses that people will call home. And he, between innocent laughs, replied, I'm going to build a whole city, Dad. And now, that boy was gone, leaving in his place a drunk, indebted man full of resentment. I asked myself, where did I go wrong? Was I too strict? Or did my blind love feed the monster I now had in front of me? I took the remaining bottle of wine from the table, poured a glass, and watched the red liquid sway under the yellow light. I whispered, Let's toast, Danny. You don't know it, but you just gave me what I've been waiting years for. The truth. That wasn't the smile of a wounded father, but the smile of a man who's about to act. I'd been silent for too long. I'd protected, trusted, and fooled myself into believing that love was enough to save everything. But love can't rescue someone who chooses betrayal. The wind chimes on the porch rang with a soft jingle. That sound reminded me of my wife. She used to say, If you ever feel your soul is empty, listen to the wind. It will tell you what to do. And that night, in the cold Denver air, I heard it clearly. Enough, Sam. It's time for the old lion to wake up. I stood up, looking at the garden like someone observing a battlefield after the first skirmish. The blood on my hand was already dry, but inside my chest, a new flame was igniting. I knew that night wasn't the end, but the beginning of a silent, precise, and merciless war. The next morning, as the first rays of sun filtered through the curtains, I was still sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. I hadn't slept all night. On the table, there were still dry bloodstains from the night before, the dark red spread out like a reminder that the love between a father and son can also shatter like glass. I sat there, in silence, remembering everything, from the days when this house only knew laughter, to the moment it transformed into a refuge of silence and suspicion. The day my wife died, Danny was just 18. He stood at the edge of the grave, eyes dry, without shedding a single tear. I thought it was his way of handling the pain. I didn't know then that his mother's death had opened a void inside him, a void that neither money nor luxury could ever fill. Claire, on the other hand, was 16. She was the only one who hugged me and said, "From now on, I'll take care of you, Dad." And she has kept that promise to this day. Danny was different. He soon wanted to leave home, talk about independence, although for him, being independent meant living off excess, debts, and carefully planned lies. I kept sending him money, kept helping him, kept believing he was just lost and that one day he'd come back to the right path. I remember once he came to my office, put his arm around my shoulders, and smiled brightly. "Dad, I'll make you proud someday, I promise." And I believed him. I always believed him. But blind faith can become the rope you hang yourself with. I can still see it clearly that morning last year when Danny came for me to sign off on an investment, a supposed innovative restaurant project, he said. Brooke was with him, with that sweet smile that actually hid calculation. "We just want to make you happy, Mr. Monroe, so you can see your son can be successful too." I gave him the money, not because I trusted the project, but because I needed to believe that the little boy who once helped me build our first house still lived inside him. I looked up at the photo hanging on the wall, me in the middle of my two kids, my hand on Danny's shoulder while Claire hugged her mother. A family that was once complete, now only half a portrait. The coffee was completely cold. In my mind, my wife's words echoed, spoken years ago. "If our children ever stop listening to you, remember you're the one who taught them to talk." That sentence shook me. Yes, I was the one who taught them, and that meant I also had to accept my share of the blame. But responsibility doesn't mean enduring it forever. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Joe Lewis, my trusted accountant. "Joe, I need you to review every secondary account that Danny has had access to, all of them." "Yes, sir. Is something wrong?" I paused for a few seconds before answering, in a low voice. "I think I've left the keys to my house in the wrong hands for too long." When I hung up, I went out to the garden. The roses my wife had planted were still blooming, their perfume stirring memories. I touched one of the petals and murmured as if I were talking to her. "I've allowed them to hurt me too much, but I promise you, Mary, from today on, I won't let anyone humiliate me again." And right there, under the sunlight that bathed the garden in golden tones, I decided to start searching for the truth, even if it meant losing everything. I still remember that morning when Joe Lewis, the head of accounting at the company, called me with a harsh, worried voice. "Mr. Monroe, there are some small transactions that don't add up. I think you should look at them." I frowned. For the last few years, the company had been running smoothly, and I rarely bothered with accounting details. But a vague gut feeling surfaced inside me that made me shudder. Since the night Danny attacked me, anything related to him put me on guard. When I got to the Monroe Construction HQ, Joe Lewis was already waiting with a thick file. He put a spreadsheet in front of me. Small withdrawals. $1,000, $2,000, sometimes $5,000, repeated for almost a year. The total, nearly $30,000. "Who has access to these accounts?" I asked. Joe looked down. "You, me, and Danny." The room seemed to spin. I sat there in silence for a long time, and then exhaled. Maybe he withdrew it to pay for something for work. "Please, check." I heard my own voice, but it sounded distant, like someone else's. A part of me still wanted to protect Danny, to find an excuse for him. He was still my son, but the other part already knew the truth. That same afternoon, I summoned him to my office. Danny walked in, well-dressed, shirt neatly pressed, a light smile on his face as if nothing had happened on Father's Day. "What did you want to tell me, Dad?" he asked. I looked him straight in the eye. "There's money missing from the company accounts, $30,000. Do you have an explanation?" He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just shrugged. "I made some advance payments for some jobs. I have receipts. When the restaurant project starts turning a profit, I'll replace it." And he put a stack of invoices on my desk, printed numbers, markups in red. I sifted through page by page. Everything in order. Too in order for my taste. "A restaurant?" I inquired. "Yeah. Brooke and I invested in a new restaurant chain. It's a real opportunity, Dad. I want to prove that I don't depend on you." He spoke with the confidence of someone who believes their own lies. He had the look of someone selling fake confidence. After 40 years in business, I recognized that look instantly. I didn't want to make a scene or lose the last spark of hope. I barely muttered, "Do you know that what I'm most afraid of isn't losing money but losing you?" Danny smiled coldly. "You're afraid of losing control." Those words were a cold knife stuck in my chest. When he left, I stayed, watching the door close, listening to his footsteps fade away. I understood that the last bond connecting us had broken. That night, back at home, I looked at my work-worn hands, the same hands that had built so many projects, and I noticed them trembling, a mix of rage and pain. I got up, opened the old box with my address book, and looked for the name Ray Sullivan, an old friend who had been a private investigator. I dialed and said without preamble, "Ray, I need you. I want to find out the whole truth about Danny Monroe and his wife." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then his deep voice. "Are you ready to hear all of it, Sam?" I answered firmly. "I'm ready to lose a son, if that's the price for saving my honor." And with that call, the silent war between father and son was officially declared. A week later, I got a call from Brooke. Her voice was soft, soaked in sweetness. "Mr. Monroe, I wanted to visit to apologize for what happened with Danny. We're truly sorry." I hesitated for a few seconds, but I accepted. A part of me still wanted to believe that maybe she could help my son come to his senses. But as soon as Brooke walked through the door, I knew I was wrong. She arrived wearing expensive perfume, her hair pulled back precisely, her gaze bright but cold. She didn't look like a repentant daughter-in-law. "I brought you some lemon bars. Claire told me you liked them." She smiled courteously, though her smile was a perfectly rehearsed calculation. We sat in the living room, surrounded by the scent of jasmine tea that my wife had loved so much. "I know Danny hurt you, but he's under a lot of pressure," she began. "Pressure is never a reason to hit your own father," I replied, my voice low. Brooke nodded, feigning empathy, and then lowered her tone. "Sometimes young men make mistakes. I think if you were less strict, everything would be different." She pronounced "you" with a pause that sounded distant, as if she wanted to remind me I was an old man, out of touch with his time. I watched her carefully, every gesture, every look, every word. She wasn't looking to reconcile. She was measuring me. She opened her bag and took out an impeccable folder, a professional presentation, a business plan for a restaurant chain called Luna Verde. "Danny and I prepared this carefully. We just need an investment of $60,000. I assure you you'll get it back in 3 months. It's a real opportunity, sir." Her voice was honey sweet, her eyes moist, as if she were trying to move me. But I just smiled faintly. "Brooke, you studied finance, right?" "Yes, I have a finance degree." "Then you should know that no serious project doubles its profits in 3 months. Do you really think that's realistic?" Brooke froze for an instant, but quickly regained her composure. "Don't you trust us? We just want you to be comfortable when you retire. You've worked your whole life. Now you should let the young people take over." Those words, though spoken softly, sounded in my head like a shovel throwing dirt on a grave. She hadn't come to apologize. She had come to take measure of my power and to clear the path for a bigger plan. I closed the folder and handed it back to her. "I don't invest in other people's dreams, Brooke, especially when there's no room for me in those dreams." She held my gaze and then smiled. "I understand. But sometimes, Mr. Monroe, those who don't adapt get replaced. Oh, I didn't respond. It wasn't necessary. The message was clear. When she left, her smile was still on her face, but in her eyes, a cold spark glittered, the look of someone who has already scented their prey. I went out to the porch and watched her car disappear beyond the gate of the pines. In my mind, only one thought echoed. If Danny is lost, Brooke is the one guiding him deeper into the darkness, and from that moment, I knew this was no longer a war between father and son, but between reason and ambition. Ray Sullivan came to see me on a Friday afternoon as the sun was setting over the old stone buildings of Denver. He still looked the same. Gray coat, thin frame, and that sharp gaze of someone who has seen too much dirt in his life. We met at a small cafe in Cherry Creek, the same place where I signed the most important contracts of my career, and where now another type of contract was beginning, the one to find the truth. Speak plainly, Sam. Your son, Danny Monroe, and his wife, Brooke. What exactly do you want to know? I looked him in the eye, my voice calm. Everything. Money, friends, places they frequent. I don't want comfort, I want proof. Ray nodded, opening his old leather notebook. I've heard that name, Brooke Serrano. Her family was involved in some money laundering cases, but there was never enough evidence to convict them. Since she married your son, they've been living way beyond their means. I clenched my fists tightly. Start with my company. Danny managed some secondary accounts. I suspect he used them for other purposes. Ray took notes calmly and then said in a low voice, You know something, Sam? I've been in this business for over 20 years, and there's one thing that never fails. People start hiding money when they start hiding the truth. That phrase stayed with me all the way back to the pines. When I opened the door to the house, the sunset had faded. In the living room, Danny and Brooke were sitting, waiting for me. I stood motionless. Brooke smiled with practiced sweetness. Dad, we came to apologize and to tell you about the progress on the restaurant project. We found a location in Lodo. We just need an additional investment to get started, Danny added with forced confidence. I know you're angry, Dad, but this is a real opportunity. I'm going to prove to you that I'm not a failure. I watched them. Brooke put a hand on her husband's shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of love, but a silent command, a sign of dominance. I remained silent for a few seconds before asking, Oh? You said Lodo. What's the name of the place? Luna Verde, sir, Brooke replied immediately, and a fleeting glint flashed in her eyes. Pretty name. Though I remember the last time someone used the word Luna was for a restaurant in Chicago, which closed due to debt. Brooke tensed for just an instant. Danny jumped in right away. Don't worry, Dad, I've got everything under control. I smiled calmly, lowering my head as if I agreed. Perfect. Then show me the lease, the business license, and the detailed budget. If everything is clear, I'll invest. Danny's eyes lit up, but Brooks turned cold and cautious. Of course. We'll send them to you right away, she said. I'll be waiting, I replied in an even icy tone. When they left, I stood watching from the window. Danny's car turned onto the main road. In the reflection of the headlights, Brooke turned her head. Her arrogant, distrustful gaze cut through the night stillness like a blade. I picked up the phone and immediately dialed Ray. Start following them tomorrow, both of them. I want to know where they go, who they meet, what they spend, and why a woman like Brooke chose an indebted man like my son. Got it, he replied. I'll have news for you in 3 days. I hung up and felt a chill run down my spine. I knew I was about to enter a maze where there would no longer be family, only truth and lies mixed together. I looked at the family photo on the wall, my wife, Claire, Danny, and me, and I murmured, If you're listening, Mary, forgive me. I'm about to do what no father wants to do. Investigate his own son. Outside, the wind rustled the rose bushes, and the chimes on the porch rang again, soft, insistent, as if announcing the first step of a carefully planned storm. 3 days later, as Denver was covered in the faint gray of the first autumn rains, Ray called me. His voice sounded deep and measured, like someone about to place a key piece on the board. I have something you need to see, Sam. Today, at 6, at the Europa Cafe in Cherry Creek. Come alone. I arrived on time. The cafe was almost empty. the smell of freshly ground beans mixed with that of the old furniture. Ray was waiting for me in a secluded corner with a thick envelope on the table. He didn't say a word. He just pushed it toward me. I opened it, and I felt my heart tighten like a fist. Black and white photographs, crystal clear. Danny and Brooke entering a building with no sign, but I recognized it instantly. The El Dorado Club, an underground gambling spot that the papers had already talked about. Both were elegantly dressed. Serious, not with the expression of someone looking for fun, but of someone doing business. Another image. Brooke with a caramel-colored bag, the same one she carried the last time she came to my house, and Danny with a wad of cash in his hand, his gaze lost. Ray spoke slowly, each word like a nail. They go there frequently, almost every week. The money isn't going to any restaurant, Sam. It's going to the roulette tables. I closed my eyes. The images from Father's Day, the sound of breaking glass, my son's hateful words. It all came rushing back, I murmured. Brooke. She's guiding him, isn't she? Ray nodded. Exactly. She doesn't just know. She participates. The casino has them both registered. I also have a copy of the security footage. Brooke playing baccarat with a group of regulars, including the owner of the place. I looked at him, my voice hoarse. Why is she doing it? Danny's already lost, but she doesn't need to. Ray sighed. People like Brooke don't just want money, they want power. And power is easier when you control someone weaker. His words hit me like a hammer blow to the chest. I turned to the last photo. Danny, slumped over the bar, shirt open, gaze empty. Beside him, Brooke was talking to a man in a dark suit. His face was blurry, but his posture was unmistakable. That of someone giving orders, not taking them. I'll need more time, Ray said. I want to confirm the identity of that man. I suspect he's the owner of the El Dorado, linked to 2 other casinos, the Vegas Secret and Fortune Palace. Danny owes money to all 3. How much? I asked. $400,000. The number froze my blood. I sat in silence, listening to the rain beat against the windows. 400,000. Exactly the figure he demanded that night. There were no more doubts. Danny's attack wasn't a fit of rage, but a desperate plan. Ray, I whispered, can you stay on them closely? Of course, but be careful. The underground gambling crowd doesn't tolerate observers. And remember something, Sam. From now on, they are no longer just your son and daughter-in-law. They are your targets. When I left the cafe, I left the envelope in Ray's hands. I only kept one photograph. Danny leaving the casino in the rain, soaked, his eyes red. Brooke behind him, her face serene, impassive. I looked at it for a long time before putting it in my wallet, right behind the old family photo. 2 images, 2 worlds, one of memories, one of truths. That night, back at the Pines, I opened a brand new bottle of wine, Danny's favorite. I poured a glass, raised it, and murmured to myself, "You want to gamble, Danny? Fine. But remember, your father has never lost a game." And under the yellowish light of the living room, I began to plan the first move in the game that would restore a father's honor. A week after the meeting in Cherry Creek, Ray called me with a voice more urgent than usual. "Sam, I have something, and you need to hear it right now. Let's meet again at the Europa Cafe. Same table as always." He opened his briefcase, took out a USB drive and several color photos. His face darkened, his eyes grave. "I managed to get into the El Dorado's internal system. There are audios. Prepare yourself." Ray turned on the laptop, and a recording played. Brooke's voice, polished and cold. "Your father isn't lucid anymore. We have to declare him incompetent before he moves the money." Danny's voice responded, trembling with fear. "And what if he finds out? I don't want to end up on the street." "He won't find out. Men his age only understand when you take away their control. He'll force us to do it himself." I sat motionless, listening to every word. A sour cold rose in my throat. Ray turned off the audio and looked at me directly. "They already have a lawyer. Victor Vance, a specialist in mental incompetency cases. A dangerous guy who has left families with nothing." I closed my eyes and breathed with effort. My voice sounded harsh. "They want to declare me legally incompetent to transfer the assets to their name." "Exactly. And Brooke is leading the charge. Danny is just a puppet." Ray took out more photographs. In one, Brooke is sitting in an elegant restaurant across from Victor Vance, the man in the dark suit I had seen blurry in the previous photo. She is signing documents with a serene expression. They're preparing the file to take to court, Ray continued. Brooke also hired a psychiatrist to evaluate your mental state. She wants to create a record that you're starting to get confused, forgetting signatures, losing control. I looked up at the cafe's rain-streaked window. The deserted street, the lamps drawing blurred reflections. I felt a humiliation deeper than the day Danny attacked me. To be treated by your own son like a senile old man, unable to defend his honor, I asked in a low voice, almost a whisper. Ray, if I let them do this, do I lose everything? Everything. The house, the company, the accounts. When the court appoints a conservator, they can sign in your name, and once the transfers are made, there's no going back. I nodded. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was the calm of someone who has been cornered. They want to prove I'm senile? Fine. We'll see just how lucid I can be. Ray looked at me. A mix of concern and respect. What are you planning to do? I won't react. I won't show anger or warnings. I'll let them believe their plan is moving forward. Meanwhile, I'll prepare another strategy. Smarter, cleaner, and completely within the law. I stood up. I buttoned my coat and left a few coins on the table. Thanks, Ray. From now on, follow the lawyer Vance too. Every meeting, every contract, every transfer. I want irrefutable proof. Ray nodded. You're entering a legal battle, Sam. They're playing with lies. You'll have to respond with law in your head. The law, reason, and something they don't have. Pride. I stepped out into the rain. The streetlights turned the pavement into shining crystals, like drops of dried blood. That night, on the way to the Pines, I decided, I will turn this humiliation into a weapon. If they try to rip away my honor with legal tricks, I will make the law fall upon them. And when the light of the estate's gate switched on, I knew I had crossed the line between victim and hunter. From that moment, Sam Monroe stopped being the betrayed father and became the father who rewrites his own justice. The next morning, Claire called, her voice trembling but resolute. Dad, I need to see you now. I can't talk over the phone. I drove to her condo in Wash Park. The place, simple and tidy, was exactly like her, the woman who hugged me when Mom died. She closed the door, handed me her phone with a look that couldn't be more normal. Dad, I recorded the conversation between Danny and Brooke when they came to see me at the hospital. They came to convince me to cooperate. I turned on the device and listened to the recording. It wasn't a clumsy apology. It was a plan. Brooke, in a soft, cold voice, talked about Victor Vance, about how they had prepared false documents, about witnesses already lined up, and about a $200,000 fee to buy the legal process, money for the doctor who would do the evaluation and for the initial filing costs. Danny sighed, his voice mixed with desperation. We have no other choice. They want the money. They're demanding it. If we don't give it to them, they'll do something worse. They already mentioned Claire. Hearing my daughter's name from his mouth was like a stab. The sentence sounded cold to the bone. My face must have paled, but my hand stayed on the phone, listening to every word, every breath. Claire stopped the recording, her eyes red. They want me to help because my signature matters. They already have a document template, a prefabricated psychological report, and a list of prepared witnesses. In the photos, there are business cards for Victor Vance, clear, with a phone number, specialist in conservatorships, a profession I never wanted to imagine. I also saw forged signatures and the names of those who will act as witnesses. What did you do? I asked her, my voice harsh. I listened to everything. I recorded. I took photos of the fake documents. I pretended I was going to cooperate so they would keep talking. They've shown a lot. She explained in detail. Brooke showed a model contract, a psychological evaluation form, and the witness list. Claire pretended to stall and let them brag so she could get more solid evidence. Inside me, there was rage, and at the same time, warmth. Rage at the cruelty of their plan. Warmth because my daughter had chosen to be on my side. Not just with words, but with intelligence and discreet actions. Claire put her hand on mine and said softly, Dad, we have to act smart without making noise. If they think we're onto them, they'll bolt. We have to let them believe they have everything, while in reality, you've already protected most of your assets. I felt the weight of those words. The This wasn't just about legal strategy. It was a strategy of dignity. I hugged her without saying anything. The silence between us was more eloquent than any plan. Before I left, she handed me a small bag. Photocopies of the fake documents they brought and Vance's card. Driving back to the Pines, I looked at the gray Denver sky and thought, they think they control everything. They don't know that we've started another chess game and that my daughter will be the queen. After listening to all the recordings and looking my daughter in the eye, something that was a sharp pain transformed into determination. Claire didn't just come with evidence, she came with resolve. I saw it in her handshake when she left. It wasn't the grip of a submissive daughter, but that of a teammate. We sat for a long time that night around the table where my wife used to put the vase of flowers. Claire went over every phrase, every name they had mentioned, in detail. Every fragment of the recordings was a needle that hinted at the web they were weaving. I listened and took notes, my heart cold. And then, I told her with a firm voice, a voice that surprised even me. You'll play the part of an ally. You must get them to trust you so they loosen up and show more. But you can't make a single mistake. Every word and every gesture must be recorded, photographed, and saved in a safe place. Claire looked at me, her eyes bright. Dad, I already did it at the hospital. They were too trusting. They showed the fake contract in the witness list. If we reveal ourselves, they'll cut the thread. We have to give them a false sense of security. I nodded. The plan was taking shape. Claire would fake getting closer and arrange another meeting so they would continue to expose themselves. Ray would keep watching and documenting every meeting. I, from the shadows, would prepare the necessary legal steps, without rushing, without making a sound. The next morning, I called Robert Campos, my longtime lawyer. At first, his voice showed surprise, then it turned severe. Are you going to confront your own family, Sam? Are you sure? I'm sure. I want to set everything in motion. The legal, the financial, the medical. They want to take everything from us with lies. I want you to build a legal fortress and keep it absolutely secret. Robert understood instantly. He set up a confidential appointment with Ellen Reed, an expert in family law and trusts. Meeting in her office, Ellen looked at me and said something that relieved me. We'll do two things at once. First, we'll protect the assets through a secure legal structure. Second, we'll prepare the documentation to countersue legally if they attempt the incompetency lawsuit. The legal machinery started up. But first, Claire and I had to continue the act, show apparent weakness so they would make mistakes. Claire agreed to meet with Brooke again and pretend to give in, allowing them to ask her to sign some fake documents they thought were necessary. Ray would be present to record and photograph. I would hide any legal movement until the moment of the counterattack. When Claire left that night, she whispered to me, Dad, I'm scared. I put my hand on her shoulder, as a man who has protected his family for years does. I'm scared too, honey. But my biggest fear isn't losing money. It's them thinking they can hurt you. We'll make them understand, you and I together, that we're not alone. An unexpected warmth ran through my chest. That alliance wasn't just strategy. It was the fulfillment of an old promise that when tested, the real family stays united. And so, among the cracks and broken glass, my daughter and I began to build the wall that would protect our honor. The day after the meeting with Robert and Ellen, things started moving from words to action. I knew that in this game, speed and stealth were equally important. To act slowly but firmly, so they wouldn't have time to notice we were putting them in the position of prey. The first thing was to protect the source of the assets. Ellen laid out a detailed plan. Establish a family trust, transfer the majority of the assets there, and at the same time, leave a superficial sum visible that they can see, like bait. I nodded, moved by Ellen's professionalism. In parallel, Robert prepared a battery of preventative lawsuits, civil for fraud, criminal for conspiracy, and all the evidence gathered to present to the authorities if necessary. In the afternoon, I went to the bank on 17th Street. The branch manager, who has known me for decades, looked at me with a mix of surprise and respect when I requested to transfer the majority of the balances to the trust in strict secrecy. "You want confidentiality, Mr. Monroe?" he asked. "Confidentiality," I replied, and I signed every page like someone laying the foundations of an impenetrable fortress. About 3.3 million were placed out of reach of any illicit legal maneuver, and I only left about 800,000 visible in checking accounts, enough for a greedy person to see and make a mistake. We didn't stop there. Ellen advised us to make some transparent public actions to counteract the accusation of lack of capacity. I saw clear wisdom in her proposal. Public acts of social sense serve as proof of lucidity. I signed donations to 3 organizations: a children's hospital, an association for the elderly, and a vocational training center, each donation with a receipt, photos, and a press release. The images of me making the donations, my signatures, and the handshakes with the directors would be legal arrows. They would prove that an incapacitated person does not execute conscious, organized actions of that nature. At the same time, Robert and Ellen arranged an appointment with a renowned neurogeriatric specialist to conduct a formal cognitive evaluation. They wanted an exhaustive medical report certifying my full lucidity, unassailable in court. The doctor put me through various tests: short and long-term memory, reasoning, financial decision-making. I answered every question clearly. When the results came back, the doctor certified that my cognitive function was, for my age group, at an excellent level. Ellen printed multiple copies, stamped them, and added them to the file. Meanwhile, Ray never stopped following Danny and Brooke. Every morning, he sent me small reports: trips to the El Dorado, cash withdrawals, meetings with Victor Vance. Each piece of data was one more piece completing the puzzle of their crime. Claire remained key to the operation. She feigned hesitation. She showed apparent weakness so Brooke would get confident and keep exposing documents. Ray captured audios, photos, and evidence at every meeting. One night, sitting in my office, I put 2 photographs in front of me: the old family picture and the photo of Brooke signing next to Vance in an elegant restaurant. I put my hand on the paper and felt a strange calm. Everything was where it needed to be: the legal, the financial, the medical, and the evidence. They thought they were the predators. In reality, they were walking right into the trap we had set with precision. The game was just beginning, but now I knew something for certain. When they launched their final blow, our legal response would be accurate, relentless, and perfectly calculated. 3 days after completing the bank transfers, I sat with Robert and Ellen in their office on 17th Street. The large window showed the illuminated city and reflected 3 faces: a man who had accumulated too much damage, a pragmatic lawyer, and a legal strategist with a cold gaze. Ellen laid out the diagram of the new asset structure. Her voice was clear, like someone giving a lesson. We have transferred $3.3 million to the Monroe Family Trust. You will be the sole administrator until your death or until 3 independent doctors determine real incapacity. Claire will be the primary beneficiary, but the administration rights will be locked by dual conditions. No one, not even your son, can touch that money, Robert added. The rest, $800,000, will remain in visible checking accounts. That will be the surface, the lure. When they think you still have a fortune in plain sight, they will act more recklessly. Then it will be time for checkmate. I looked at the numbers and the bold clauses and nodded. I never imagined using financial intelligence to protect myself from my own blood, but life presents wars where you don't choose the enemy. Ellen handed me another folder. Here's the certificate from the neurogeriatric evaluation. You are completely lucid, with full legal capacity and aptitude for financial decisions above average. Robert smiled. A senile person doesn't sign or review 100 pages with this degree of precision. Let them try. We remained silent for a few seconds. I felt I was no longer shaking. The anger had given way to the calm of someone taking the initiative. I want all of this finalized by the end of the month, and I want copies of all the documents for Claire, in case something unexpected comes up. Robert nodded. Everything will be ready. But Sam, I have to ask, are you prepared to face Danny? I looked through the glass, where the car lights formed nets like infinite paths. No, no father is ever prepared for that, but I no longer have a choice. That afternoon, I stopped by St. Mary's Cathedral, near the office. I sat under the vault, in front of the statue of the Virgin Mary with the candles flickering. I didn't pray for victory. I just asked not to become what Danny is. Maybe it was that faith that kept me sane. Back at the Pines, I found Claire reviewing medical files in her office with soft music in the background. I put a thick envelope on the table. Here's everything. From now on, you'll know exactly what Dad is protecting. Claire opened the envelope, her eyes moist. Dad, you did something I never imagined. You turned betrayal into strategy. I barely smiled. You know, people think a father only knows how to endure, but sometimes enduring is just preparing the ground. That night when she was asleep, I went out to the rose garden. The night air was cold and pure. I looked at the late-blooming flowers and whispered, Mary, do you see? I've rebuilt our walls. We lost a son, but I'm not going to lose faith in justice. Under the pale moonlight, I understood that this fight was no longer just about preserving money, but about reclaiming the dignity of an outraged father with lucidity and dignity. When all the legal plans were securely in Robert and Ellen's hands, I started doing something none of them expected. I disappeared from the game. It wasn't running away, but silence. A calculated silence like that of a hunter lying in the brush so the prey approaches confidently. I stopped calling. I didn't go to the office. I didn't meddle in anything. I asked Joe Lewis to handle the daily routine and only send me reports by email. With Danny and Brooke, I cut off all contact. No messages, no reproaches, no rehashing the fight. I let them believe I was truly weak, tired, and starting to get confused. The effect came sooner than I expected. Within a week, Danny wrote to Claire. How's Dad? He seemed odd the other day, looking all around, not answering clearly. Claire forwarded me the message. I read it and smiled. It was the smile of someone watching the aggressor start to fall into the trap they themselves had dug. I changed my lifestyle. I got up earlier. I walked alone through the roses, but I'd pretend to forget my wallet, my keys. I let the neighbors see me, so that later someone would tell Danny. Sometimes I'd let the phone ring with dozens of missed calls, and the next day I'd say, Sorry, I forgot to answer. Every little gesture was calculated to blur the image of the firm father they knew and make them believe their plan was going to work. At first, Claire didn't understand. She'd come and ask, worried, What are you doing, Dad? If they think you're really weak, they'll really believe it. I smiled and tapped her hand. That's what we need, honey. The hunter only approaches when he thinks the prey has fallen. She fell silent, but in her eyes I saw trust. That trust I had lost in Danny, and that was now being reborn. I relearned the art of patience. Every night, I wrote in a notebook, keeping a record of every step they took toward the hole they were digging for themselves. In my journal, I noted, Day 10, no contact. Ray is still on surveillance. They went to see Vance for the second time. Ray informed me by phone on an encrypted line. They're preparing the file. Brooke signed a provisional authorization. Danny. He looks exhausted. The debts are crushing him. But Brooke is smiling, I replied. Let them keep smiling. When the trader's confidence reaches its peak, that's when it's most fragile. I spent a lot of time in the garden, the place where my wife used to rest. The rose bushes were in full bloom, red and alive. Every morning I cut a rose and put it on Claire's desk, a reminder that, despite the coldness of the strategy, we were still human. One afternoon, Brooke appeared at the entrance of the Pines. She didn't call. She arrived as if she were just passing by. I saw her from the window, dressed in beige tones, a light coat, her face full of confidence. She waved from the gate. Mr. Monroe, I was passing by and wanted to see how you are. I acted slowly, with a lost gaze, as if it were hard for me to place her. Brooke, right? It's been a while, hasn't it? She approached with a wide smile. Yes, sir. It has. They say you've been forgetting things lately. Can I help you with anything? I nodded and replied with a deliberately shaky voice. Yes. Sometimes I don't remember things like I used to. Brooke leaned in, looked at me intently, and her smile softened, but her eyes showed a satisfaction she couldn't hide. I knew I had succeeded. The confused old man's script had sunk deep into her head. When the door closed and her car drove away, I called Ray. She believes it's working. Get ready for the next step, Ray. It's time for the prey to think it's about to win. And in my silence, I found the taste of approaching justice, slow, precise, and inevitable. 2 weeks after Brooke's phony visit, the trap I had set began to close. Claire notified me that Brooke had contacted her, her tone more jubilant than ever. Poor thing, your dad, Claire. Time spares no one. But don't worry. When the paperwork is ready, we'll take good care of him. Her voice oozed with pity, but you could hear the breath of someone who already smells victory. Claire feigned empathy. I think so too. He seems very forgetful. Let me talk to the lawyer, Vance. Maybe he can help. Perfect, Brooke replied, unable to hide her excitement. Mr. Vance is completely trustworthy. Next week we'll sign the document certifying his cognitive decline. If you sign, this is settled. I listened to the recording Claire had made in secret and remained incredibly calm. They had swallowed the bait completely. The next morning, we met. Robert, Ellen, Ray, Claire, and I. On the table was a packed file. Photos, recordings, cash withdrawals, documents proving the relationship between Brooke, Vance, and the network of underground casinos. Robert pointed to the photo of Brooke signing a power of attorney at a restaurant. This proof is enough to open a criminal case, but let's not use it yet. Let them sign one more copy. That will be the one that finishes them. The new plan was drawn. Claire would continue to play the accomplice. She would agree to see Danny and Brooke at the usual cafe, but Ray would place a small camera in the pocket of her blazer. She would have to provoke them at the precise moment to boast about the plan and mention the amounts. Perfect proof for the court to demonstrate the conspiracy to strip a living person of his assets. The meeting took place on a Thursday afternoon. I waited in the car a short distance from the cafe with an earpiece connected to the recording device. Brooke's voice came through clear, honeyed, and full of lies. Claire, when the court approves it, all the assets will be under our management. We can move, open a private hospital for ourselves. Your dad won't even remember anything by then. He's just a shadow now, Danny chimed in with a threat of fear. As long as Dad doesn't realize it too soon. I already handled the fake doctor, but what if he recovers? He won't, Brooke whispered, her voice like a snake's. He's fading. We just have to push him a little. I gripped the steering wheel. Every sentence added fuel to the fire that had been burning inside me for months. But I couldn't react. I had to wait. Wait for the final moment when the trap snapped shut and there was no escape. When the meeting ended, Claire came out and faked a goodbye smile. Ray approached and retrieved the device. In the car, I listened to the recording from start to finish. There was no doubt. Everything they had said was enough proof to incriminate them. That night, I took out the old bottle of wine my wife kept for special occasions. I poured a small glass and sat by the window, looking at the rose garden blooming for the third time that year. I raised the glass and murmured, Son, I once forgave your faults, but this time, you didn't just lose your father's affection, you destroyed yourself. I turned off the light, called Robert, and said, We have more than enough proof. Prepare the complaint, but don't file it yet. I want to see them in front of me, directly. There was a pause, and then Robert replied, Are you sure, Sam? That face-to-face won't be easy. I'm sure, I replied, my voice hard as stone. It's time for the prey to think it's about to win and discover it's trapped. I didn't sleep that night. I knew that at dawn, the final confrontation between father and son would begin. Friday dawned with a gray sky over Denver, like an omen of a storm. I got up early and put on the old black suit Mary had picked out for me years ago. Everything was ready. The files, the copies of the fake contracts, the medical certificate, the recordings, the photos. Robert had written, They'll come at 10. Ellen and I will wait in the adjoining room. When you give the signal, we'll come in. I just replied, Thanks. The Pines was unusually silent. I made coffee. I placed 3 cups on the table, one for me, one for Danny, and one for Brooke. The aroma filled the air, but inside me there was no bitterness left. Only a cold serenity. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw them. Danny in a white shirt, shaved, his face tense. Beside him, Brooke, impeccable, with her inseparable leather bag and that smile of someone who thinks they've won. "Hi, Dad," Danny said, his voice unsure. "Come in, kids," I replied calmly. We sat down. I poured the coffee without saying anything. Brooke was the first to speak, as honeyed as ever. "Sir, we just came for you to sign some documents. It's a small formality, so Claire can help you with the administration of the assets." I looked at her and nodded calmly. "I'm old. My memory isn't what it used to be. Could you explain in detail what I'm about to sign?" She opened her bag, took out a stack of papers, and arranged them carefully in front of me. Danny avoided my gaze. I glanced at the first few pages: cognitive evaluation and temporary conservatorship. I smiled faintly and put my glasses on the table. "How thorough. You've prepared well, huh?" Brooke forced a smile, feigning serenity. "We just want your peace of mind. Everything is legal, certified by our lawyer, Mr. Vance. You know, at your age, you shouldn't be burdened with so much." I lifted my head and looked at her directly. The force of my gaze made her falter. "Vance? Ah, yes, the man you had dinner with at the Lookout last week. The restaurant with the mirrored walls and red chairs." Brooke's face froze. Danny looked up, bewildered. I continued in a low, sharp voice. "And here I have the recording of that meeting. Maybe you should hear your voice before you keep talking." I pressed the button on the phone. In the silence of the room, Brooke's voice echoed. "When we declare him incompetent, the money will be ours." Danny turned pale. He stammered, "Dad, I didn't know she—" I cut him off. "Enough. Here's your signature, Danny. Isn't this yours? Dated the 3rd of this month." I put the copy of the fake contract and the photos of both of them in Vance's office in front of him. Brooke, trying to regain control, shouted, "You're trapping us! This is a violation of privacy!" I raised an eyebrow. "No, Brooke, this is justice, and if you thought you could fool an old man forever, you're wrong." At that moment, the door opened. Robert and Ellen entered, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers. One of them announced, "We have a warrant for the arrest of Mrs. Brooke Monroe and Mr. Danny Monroe for conspiracy to commit fraud, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft of assets." Danny stood up trembling and looked at me. "Dad, please. I didn't think it would come to this." I looked at him, my voice low but firm. "It's not me who is punishing you, Danny. You are the one who has punished yourself." Brooke shot me a final look, loaded with hatred. I just said, "You forgot something, Brooke. Old men might be slow, but they're not blind." When the officers led them out the gate, I stood still, watching the garden through the window. The rose bushes swayed in the wind, and every petal that fell marked the end of the days of humiliation. Robert put a hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Sam. You got it all back." I shook my head slowly. "No, Robert. I haven't gotten anything back. I've just stopped allowing my trust to be trampled." I turned slowly. I knew the battle was over. But being a father never ends. The news of the case spread faster than I imagined. The next morning, the local news ran a brief story. Couple arrested for attempting to steal assets from an elderly father, a prominent Denver businessman. My name was hidden, but everyone in the business community knew who it was. The office phone didn't stop ringing, some out of curiosity, others with false concern, and a few sincere, wanting to confirm if Mr. Monroe had really lost his mind. I didn't answer anyone. I spent most of the day in the garden, where the police had finished collecting evidence and sealing the documents. They took the fake contracts, the recordings, and also the last shred of faith I had left in Danny, among the rose bushes, damp with dew. I only heard the echo of my own footsteps. In the afternoon, Robert, Ellen, and Ray arrived. We sat around the wooden table with a mountain of folders in front of me. Robert spoke first. "We've handed everything over to the DA's office. They will prosecute Brooke, Vance, and Danny. With the evidence you provided, this case will be a textbook example of family fraud." I nodded in silence, looking out the window. "How long will it take to resolve?" "In 2 weeks, they'll have the pre-trial detention order. Nothing to worry about. Your assets are intact. They can't prove any legal ownership." Ray smiled discreetly. I've been investigating for over 20 years, and I've never seen someone lay such a perfect trap, Sam. They walked right into it, step by step, with no way out, I replied calmly. Sometimes justice doesn't need noise, just time, for the truth to come out on its own. Ellen handed me a small envelope. This is the court ruling on your legal status. The court has certified that you are fully lucid and have total legal capacity. The document was published today. No one will ever call you an old man out of his mind again. I opened the envelope. The court's red seal gleamed on the paper. I felt relief, but also a bottomless void. This victory brought no joy. It was like emerging from the ruins after a fire. You can breathe, yes, but the smoke still burns your chest. That night, Claire came home. She hugged me for a long time without words. Her shoulders were trembling, and she murmured, "Dad, I'm sorry." I doubted Danny, but I never imagined he would fall this low. I put a hand on her shoulder, my voice low. "You have nothing to apologize for. You did what a good daughter should do, protect the truth, even when it hurts." She lifted her head, tears shining in her eyes. "Are you going to forgive them, Dad?" I looked toward the window, where the evening light gilded the old walls. Forgive? Maybe someday, but not today. Later that evening, the police called me. They confirmed that Brooke had confessed everything, how she contacted Vance, how she forged the documents, how she used the casino owners to pressure Danny. But what left me in silence was the inspector's final sentence. She said it all started because of love, that she thought she could save her husband by stealing from his father. I stood still. That sentence resonated within me. No one considers themselves evil. Every traitor convinces themselves they are saving something. I exhaled slowly and murmured, "Love is no excuse for betrayal. If it needs lies to survive, then it's already dead." Night fell, and Denver was covered in golden lights. I went out to the garden. I breathed in the smell of the damp earth after the rain. There was no hatred left in me, only a soft sadness, the sadness of someone who has won a war that should never have existed. And as I looked up at the night sky, I understood. The truth was now revealed, but the true justice was the silence that now surrounded me. 2 months later, the trial was held at the Denver District Court. I sat in silence in the front row, my hands clasped. Robert and Ellen were by my side, and behind me, Claire watched me without looking away. Across from me, Danny, Brooke, and Victor Vance, 3 faces that for years were part of my life, and that now seemed unrecognizable. The courtroom was completely silent when the prosecutor stood to speak. He read the indictment with a firm voice, each sentence landing like a hammer. The defendants, Brooke Monroe and Danny Monroe, are charged with conspiring to seize the assets of a direct family member using false documents and legal fraud. The defendant, Victor Vance, as an accomplice, is charged with professional misconduct and unjust enrichment. As they projected the evidence, I didn't look up. I knew every photograph, every recording, every forged signature by heart. Only when Brooke's voice echoed through the speakers did the entire room fall into an absolute silence. "When we declare him incompetent, the money will be ours." That echo cut through me again. It was the same sentence that had haunted me for so many sleepless nights, and that now became the centerpiece of their conviction. Mr. Vance tried to defend them, but his voice trembled. Brooke kept her head down for most of the trial, looking at Danny from time to time with bitter resentment. Danny, on the other hand, looked at no one. His shoulders slumped, hands clenched, gaze empty. When the prosecutor finished, Robert stood up. He spoke in a low, serious tone, without raising his voice. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Sam Monroe, is not here to recover his fortune. He is here so the law can affirm something more valuable, that a man's honor, regardless of his age, cannot be stolen." No one breathed. The judge banged his gavel and pronounced the sentence. "This court sentences Danny Monroe to 5 years in prison for complicity in fraud and assault on a family member. Brooke Monroe, 3 years in prison for masterminding fraud and forgery of documents. Victor Vance, 4 years in prison and permanently disbarred." It all happened so fast it was hard to process. Danny raised his head, his eyes moist, lips trembling, unable to speak. Brooke turned toward me. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fury. Vance looked down, avoiding my gaze. The judge banged the gavel one last time. I stood up and walked slowly toward them. The officers tried to stop me, but I raised my hand. I looked at Danny for a long time and spoke slowly, in a low, calm voice. You had everything to be a good man, but you chose the shortest path to destroy yourself. I'm not angry anymore, just sad. The saddest part is that you never understood that honor isn't measured in money, but in the word you keep. Danny broke down crying and fell to his knees. The officers lifted him up and took him away, along with Brooke. I watched them go without saying another word. Claire came up and took my hand tightly. She didn't cry. In her eyes there was both pain and pride. That afternoon, a fine drizzle covered Denver. Claire and I left the courthouse in silence. On the steps, Robert said goodbye. You won, Sam. I looked at the rain sliding over the stones and replied in a low voice. No, Robert, I didn't win. I just prevented this tragedy from becoming a habit in my family. We kept walking, leaving behind the courthouse and the sound of the wind in the trees. Inside me, there was no victory, only a release and a wound that would never fully close. 3 months after the trial, the Pines returned to its serene appearance. The iron gate opened every morning to let in the valley air. The rose bushes were blooming again, and their fragrance mixed with the smell of damp grass after the rain. But inside that house, everything had changed. There were no more shouts, no suspicions, just long silences in which I learned to live with the pain without letting it devour me. Claire came to see me every weekend. She brought homemade food, told me stories from the hospital, and then we'd sit and have coffee in the garden. Sometimes we'd stay quiet for hours, just watching the petals fall. In that silence, I understood something simple. Loss doesn't always need to be filled. Sometimes it just needs to be accepted. One morning, I received a letter, a white envelope, shaky handwriting. It was from Danny. I saw the word Dad in the corner of the paper and felt a knot in my chest. I opened the letter. My son's voice sounded like that of a lost man. I don't know where to start. Everything I did was wrong. I thought that with money, I would gain respect. Now I understand that the only thing I lost was my father's trust. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Brooke filed for divorce in prison. I feel lighter, but also empty. I just wish I could hear you say that I'm still your son. I folded the letter. I sat for a long time, watching the sunlight move slowly across the floor. Inside me, something softened, and at the same time, it broke all over again. Forgiveness. How many times can one forgive the same person? I took the letter, went out to the garden, and lit it on fire. The blue flame slowly devoured the word Dad until only smoke remained. I murmured, I don't hold a grudge against you anymore, Danny, but forgiving isn't forgetting. I forgive you for my own sake, to be at peace, but this house, son, will remain closed to you. That afternoon, I wrote in my diary, October 15th, first letter from Danny, maybe the last. He has repented, but not all repentance needs to be welcomed. I closed the notebook, feeling like I had just closed a book. At the end of the month, Robert came to visit. He brought news. Part of the funds I had earmarked for charity was used to build a support center for elderly victims of abuse or financial fraud. I was speechless when I saw the bronze plaque with the inscription, "The Monroe Foundation. In memory of dignity," Robert said. "You've transformed your pain into something useful. Few people manage that." I smiled, my voice serene. No one truly loses as long as they keep their dignity. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to understand the value of what's left. When night fell, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine. The wind carried the scent of jasmine and the chirping of crickets mixed with the tingling of the wind chimes. I thought of Mary, of Claire, and also of Danny. 3 different colors from the same painting of a life, impossible to separate. In the darkness, I murmured, like a whisper to myself, there are wounds that never close, but at least I've learned not to make them bleed. I took a sip, feeling the warmth go down my throat, warm, but not bitter. Because in the end, I understood. Forgiveness has limits, and the true reward for the one who remains is peace. A year after everything, Denver was dressed in spring again. No gray rain left, just a warm sun that gilded the streets. The Pines, the house that witnessed my collapse, was once again filled with the songs of birds and the aroma of flowers. I live alone, simply, but not in solitude. Every morning I make coffee, open the windows, and let the air in. On the table, the old family photo still remains. Mary smiling, Claire with her curly hair, and Danny, that little boy with the clear gaze. I didn't put it away. Not because I've forgotten, but because I no longer want to live hating. Claire now runs the Monroe Foundation, the charity we created after the trial. She comes every weekend. She tells me about the elderly people who have received help, about the children who regained their parents' trust, and when she says, "Dad, they thank you for creating this place," I just smile. I didn't do anything grandiose. I just refused to let my pain be in vain. One afternoon in March, while I was watering the garden, the mailman arrived. He brought a thick envelope with the seal, Canyon City Correctional Facility, for Mr. Sam Monroe. I knew who sent it without opening it. I took it into the house, left it on the table, looked at it for a long time, and then opened it. Dad, they reduced my sentence for cooperating with the investigation. I'll be out sooner than expected. I don't know if you'll want to see me. I understand you have every right to close all the doors, but I want to tell you something. Thank you for not letting me continue to be a bad person. I read each line slowly. Then I folded the letter. This time, I didn't burn it. I put it in a wooden box where I keep family things, next to Mary's and my wedding photo. I don't know if I've forgiven him completely, and maybe I don't need to know. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, but rather stopping the past from ruling the present. That night, Claire came over with 2 glasses of wine and a serene smile. Dad, today marks 1 year since the trial ended. I think we should celebrate. I laughed. I poured the wine. We sat on the porch, looking at the rose garden. The moon shed its light on the petals, and I said in a low voice, "You know, honey, I've learned the biggest lesson of my life. They can take your money, your fame, even the love of your family, but no one can take your dignity if you don't hand it over." Claire squeezed my hand with a look full of pride, different from all the previous ones. Later, when she had left, I stayed alone. The wind made the chimes that Mary hung on the porch ring. I closed my eyes and listened to them as if they were her voice. "You did it, Sam. You finally found peace." I smiled. I looked up at the starry sky and murmured, "Mary, I'm still here, in this garden, in our daughter's love. I didn't get revenge. I just lived better. And that's the only revenge worth having." I raised my glass to the quiet of the night. The best revenge is living well. And in that instant, I felt as light as the wind, no longer the betrayed father or the victim of greed, but a man who had completed his journey with his honor intact and a heart capable of forgiveness. If this story captivated you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left of your screen. Thanks for watching.